Excellent. So lovely. Nice to see you rolling in. This is great. If you haven't typed in where you're from, throw your name there. And I guess we'll kick off we could kick off now. What do you reckon, Ian?
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. My name's Ian Collier. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the program director that looks after all of the tech fests at Hanover Fairs. And I wanted to thank you all on behalf of the organization for joining us this morning. It's wonderful to meet you in such special circumstances. As we begin the work of today, we're all faced with new challenges. Recent events have turned our lives upside down in a very, very short time. But although we are physically isolating, I think it's more important than ever that we come together, that we work to facilitate sharing, insights, advice, and collaboration. And so for the coming months, my team, our organization, aim to be with you on this journey. We all need to ensure, I think, that when we come out the other end, which we will, that we're ready to go strategically, technically, and more importantly, sometimes I think mentally as well. Mm-hmm. So over the coming weeks, we've got a raft of speakers, some fantastic folks from around the world. We've got Michael today, who's coming in from Toronto, who are going to be examining those very issues and inspiring us. Plus, we will be putting together some community groups, some smaller groups, where we can all come together and talk in some detail around some particular issues. And what we will be able to do is help each other. So we are a community. We are about coming together. We are about ideas and suggestions. And if you have any questions, burning issues, burning questions on today or in the future, please do reach out to me or any of the team. But we'll jump on today. And what I want to do is just move on to today. We are absolutely honored to have Michael on the very first webinar session. My wife is the biggest fan. She is next door and over the moon that we've got him on. So I definitely win brownie points in that respect.
Perfect. What's the name of your wife, Ian?
Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa.
Shout out Vanessa.
Ian has definitely married up. I can just tell instantly.
She did. She's given it the big hurrah on the chat there, Michael. Just for those of you who don't know, I'll be very brief. He's the founder of Box of Crayons. They're a transformative organization looking to go from advice-driven to curiosity-led. He's an international keynote speaker and best-selling author. Actually, has been voted Coach of the Year, and he's got a brand new book out, The Advice Trap, which looks like it's going to go big as well. Folks, welcome, enjoy, and over to you, Michael. It's a pleasure to have you.
Perfect. It's lovely to be here. Thank you very much. Lovely to be with you during these weird, topsy-turvy, confusing times. And honestly, you in Australia have had just the crappiest time of it. It wasn't a drought. It was a bushfire. If it wasn't a bushfire, it was a plague of locusts. If it wasn't a locust, it was a virus. So holy cow, awful. I'm thinking of my family in Canberra, and I'm thinking of you, and I appreciate you being here with me. And my goal is to give you some tools that could be helpful for you to manage yourself and perhaps manage those who you live with and you work with in these difficult times where we're all struggling to get a bit of a foothold. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'm going to ask you a check-in question, because here's what I know about webinars. Even though you signed up and you've shown up and you're already ahead of the game, webinars are notoriously tricky to stay focused in, because you got your phone, you got your email, you've got my ugly face on the screen, and you're like, I could look somewhere else perhaps. So here's what I want you to do. On a score of 1 to 7, 1 being low, 7 being high, I want you to answer this question. How focused do you intend to be over the next 30 minutes or so, which is about how long this will take, about 30 minutes. How focused? 1 is utterly unfocused. You know, I've got a band playing in the corner. I've got my kids building something in the other corner. I'm actually texting somebody at the moment, and I'm texting in both hands because I've got 2 phones. 7, on the other hand, is like I'm bringing full focus. I've got my noise-canceling headphones on. I've cleared the room. I've shut the door. I've put the phone away. I've shut down the browser windows. And lots of 5s rolling in, 6s rolling in, some 7s rolling in. That's all fantastic. I don't mind what number you give yourself. I'm just making this choice, which we always have, an explicit choice. And what I'm going to ask you to do right away is I want you to make 1 adjustment to your environment that will help you hit the number that you've given yourself. I don't mind what that is, but it might be putting away something. It might be turning something off. It might be shutting something down. It might be, smothering your children under a pillow or something. I don't know what it means for you. But what I'd like you to do is adjust your environment so you can bring the attention you want to give it and lower the chances of you getting distracted. So that's good. You're making adjustments. Ian, just so I know, I'm going to check in with Ian regularly as we go through this. Ian, what number did you give yourself there?
I actually give myself a 7. I was being very
perfect.
Yeah.
Ian's going to kind of be talking to me and kind of almost co-hosting this with me. And if he'd come in at a 3, would have been off to a fairly awkward start, but that's good. Nice to see you coming in at a 7. That's great.
Someone actually put it 8, so that was good.
Exactly. There's always somebody who I'm like, look, I salute your enthusiasm, but I'm not hiring you as an accountant because clearly the whole math thing is a bit complicated for you. But thanks for showing up. So this is called 3 Questions for a Topsy-Turvy World. And I'm going to give you these 3 questions. They're powerful. I've taught them to lots of people, and I know they can be significant in helping you reshift your orientation and ground yourself. But before I get to the questions, I just want to talk about what your brain is doing right now and what it is doing under stress. Because make no mistake, your brain is, under stress at the moment. Because there is so much unknown right now. We just don't know much at all. We don't know much about this virus. We don't know what the solution to the virus is. We don't know how long this thing is going to last. We don't know the impact on our economy. We don't know the impact on our own jobs and our own companies. We don't really know the death rate in the world or in the countries. There's just this swirl of ambiguity at the moment, and your brain hates it. It hates it because your brain loves certainty. It's one of the modus operandi of your brain. Its kind of primary directive is survival. And what it does 5 times a second at an unconscious level is it continually scans the environment going, am I safe here or am I at risk? Am I safe or am I at risk? Is this a place of reward or is this a place of danger? And obviously what it's looking for is to try and find environments where it feels safe. And what it's looking to avoid are environments where it could possibly be dangerous. And this isn't even a kind of 50-50 weighing it up in the balance. The brain is much more heavily weighted to avoiding risk than towards stepping towards unknown reward. And you can guess that just from the way evolution works. The classic saber-toothed tiger scenario. Our distant ancestor from 200,000 years ago walks by the cave. One of them goes, caves, they look pretty interesting. Who knows what's in the cave? All sorts of good things could be in that cave. They walk into the cave. We never see that person again. Their DNA is not our DNA. The other ancestor of ours from 200,000 years ago walks up to the cave, sees the cave and goes, look, there could be some good stuff in their cave, and yet there could be something else in that cave. Why don't I keep walking? And that is the DNA we do have. So we are wired to go, I don't like risk. I'm wired. That's why we stay with things which are like, it's not that good, but at least it's the devil I know. And one of the 4 factors that drives our brain's judgment about is it safe or is it dangerous, is it a place of risk or a place of reward, is certainty. It loves certainty. That makes it feel comfortable. It makes it feel safe. It backs away from discomfort and from ambiguity. And what's happening at the moment is this hunger for certainty. It's why we love to see those experts on the TV. It's why politicians who stand up and go, let me be absolutely clear, make us feel good, even though we're like, you can't possibly know what you're doing at the moment. Even though we know that to be true, even though the experts are like, let me give you my absolute prediction for what's going to play out here. And we're like, how can you know that? We've never seen anything like this before. You don't have the data. We're like, but I'm feeling kind of relieved about that. Now, when your brain is under stress, when we're in this place of uncertainty, a couple of things are happening. And I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm just, I've read books on neuroscience. I've read a lot. I've tried to figure it out. But here's how I understand it. This is Neuroscience 101. When your brain is under this stress, the whole limbic area gets kind of agitated, including the amygdala, the so-called lizard brain, the fight or flight or faint part of your brain. And under stress, your brain kind of shuts down into survival mode. So it starts seeing things more black and white, kind of limits its creativity, limits its generosity, limits seeing options. Kind of you get that kind of narrow vision around, I'm just in survival mode here. You stop breathing, your shoulders go up, you hunker down just to kind of go, look, I'm protecting myself right now. And it means that while you're in survival mode, you're not showing up at your best. And one of the things that I stand for, one of the things that I champion in this world is the power of curiosity. So as Ian said, I wrote a book 4 years ago called The Coaching Habit. It was a huge and surprising success. It sold almost 750,000 copies now, which, as an aside, I spent 3 years trying to get it published with a regular publishing company, and they kept turning me down. So eventually I self-published it. So of course I feel particularly smug at the moment that it did so well. And I have a new book out called The Advice Trap. Came out a month ago. And in fact, hilariously, I paid some good money to make sure that they were actually available in Australian airports. So we're getting absolutely no sales from Australian airports right now, but never mind, I can live with it. And what I am championing is this as an essential leadership behavior. Can you stay curious a little bit longer? Can you rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? That's the behavior change that I want to see in you and in the people around you. Can you stay can you rush to action and advice a little bit more slowly? Can you stay curious just a little bit longer? Because even while we are hungry for certainty in this anxious time, the truth is we are always hungry for certainty. And what I know to be true about you, even though I have never met the 50 or 60 of you who are online at the moment, I know you are all advice-giving maniacs. I mean, you love it. I mean, you know the situation. Somebody starts talking about a scenario and you don't really know that person and you don't really know what they're talking about and you've never really met the people involved and you don't know the context and you definitely don't know the technical specification. And after about 10 seconds, your advice monster kind of looms up out of the dark and goes, oh, I've got something to say. I'm going to add some value to this conversation. And what I am hungry for is for us to slow down this leaping into action, having advice giving as our default response. And I want to embrace the power of curiosity. So what I want to talk about and kind of get into the heart of this talk with you are 3 characteristics that rise out of you showing up and being more curious. 3 leadership characteristics that can be powerful, particularly in this time of confusion and anxiety and uncertainty. But before I get to the 3 characteristics, here's what I want you to just throw in the chat box for me. What, if anything, has already been useful for you from what I've already told you? What, if anything, has already struck a chord? And Ian, let me check in with you while people are typing in their thoughts. What struck a chord for you so far in what I've said? And Ian, you'll need to turn the mute off because my lip reading ain't what it used to be.
My apologies. Did you? Were you asking me the question, or were you asking me to read?
I was asking you the question. Yeah, I'm curious to know what struck a chord for you so far.
It all strikes a chord with me. Actually, the whole thing. I think that whole journey there is very familiar right now. I think that's where we've gone. We've gone from a feeling of not knowing anything, or trying to know everything, to being blatantly not knowing anything. So
got it. And just how unstabilizing that is, and it's in some ways. It just reminds us of what the reality is, that most of the time we're not quite sure of what's going on. The little bit of data you've got is probably outdated. The little thing that you definitely do know, everybody knows because you can look it up on Google now. So we exist in this place of, well, where do I add value in my life? How do I show up in a way that's useful and supportive and encouraging and leaderly for people? And we've got some nice things coming through here around curiosity over action and advice, the human need for certainty, the power of curiousness, the power of letting go. And Melanie saying, trying to be comfortable with not knowing, which is, actually a profound insight. It sounds simple and it's actually quite difficult. So here's what starts showing up if you start leading with curiosity. And by leading, I'm not just talking about how you show up, with your team or with your direct reports, although I know many of you will have that at this time. It's how you interact with other human beings. So this is not just your corporate existence, but it's your family, and it's your kids, and it's your spouse, and it's your friends. It's that whole world around who you interact with. Leading with curiosity can be powerful. And I think three key characteristics show up. There is empathy, there's mindfulness, and there's humility. Empathy, mindfulness, and humility. And of course, these are all words you've heard of before. But I want to get into them a little bit, talk about perhaps a different definition or a way of tweaking the definition that might land for you, and then give you a question for each one of those three key characteristics. Let me start with empathy. And what I'd love to see in the chat box is, how do you define empathy at the moment? What definition do you have for empathy? Because I know lots of us have a good understanding of what empathy is. And Ian, as I look at you, how do you define empathy? What comes up for you when I say that word?
Being able to walk in someone else's shoes, or actually see the world from their point of view, and if not understand it, at least empathize with it.
Sure. I think that's a definition I've heard before, that idea of, walking somebody else's shoes. And it reminds me of a joke. It's like, if somebody really irritates you, really winds you up, you should always walk a mile in their shoes, because you'll be a mile away from them and you'll have their shoes. So that's going to be good. So let's see. It's why I'm not a stand-up comedian, because, I'm not that good at telling jokes, but still. What are we seeing coming through for empathy? We've got being curious when I feel under threat, being human and kind from Ilse. That's very nice. Seeing somebody else's perspective and feeling their feels and sensing what they need from you, feeling what the other person is feeling. So these are all very nice definitions of empathy. I've got one that's aligned with everything that you're saying and you're typing in there, but I just frame it in slightly different language. For me, empathy is about being more other aware. So we are, understandably so, somewhat self-obsessed because we live in our own head and our own brain. And inevitably, we're driven by our own needs, by our own wants. We think that how we see the world is how everybody sees the world. We think how we see the world is the truth, rather than just our experience of the world. And empathy allows you to be a little bit more other aware. So here's my question for you, which is, why would empathy be helpful in a time of anxiety and in a time of stress and in a time of uncertainty right now? Because your brain is going, screw everybody else, look after yourself, that you're number one, your survival is paramount. So let me ask you, and I want to see your thoughts in the chat box here, which is, so why do you think empathy might be helpful in a time like this? And Ian, what do you reckon? I mean, why would we bother with empathy?
Because I think it helps when we're having conversations with colleagues or with family members, to be able to not react in a negative way from a personal perspective, and be able to understand that they are coming from a place of probably similar to where I'm coming from, which is stress, possibly anxiety, possibly grief, possibly all those things.
Yeah. So I love that point from Ian, which is it allows you to be more generous to other people, which means that you're possibly less reactive to triggers, if you like, that they may be setting off for you because they're under stress. So you feel that with them. Vanessa's saying, feeling that we're all in this together. Karen is saying it's important to show people that you feel what you're feeling, but don't necessarily need to fix it. I love that. People want to feel understood, and they don't want you to fix things for them and how they're feeling. And Menzel is saying, because we're all human. So that's kind of there. And I love what Nish is saying around making a connection between empathy and compassion, and the power of compassion.
Yeah, and Melanie just said that it gets you out of yourself and think about other people as well, which I think is very important.
That's right. And I just spoke to somebody the other day who founded the Resilience Leadership Lab some years ago. So, of course, she is in hot demand right now. And she was like, you know what? A survivalist turns out to be somebody who's connected to their community. Certainly in the States, which, survivalists are kind of, I'm holed up, I've got guns, I've got cans of food, I've got an American flag wrapped around my naked torso, and I'm going for it. And it turns out actually the real survivalists are those people who built community. So there's something powerful about reaching out to other people and understanding other people. And there's this constant tugging and just the way our brain is wired to say, forget them. we don't care. We just look after yourself. That's what the brain is shouting. That unconscious brain is kind of driving you to do all the time. So I want to give you the first of the questions that I think can be helpful. And I find this question really powerful as a way to complete conversations with people with whom I live. Like my wife is just next door watching episode 5 of the Picard TV series at the moment. So we use this question occasionally. I use this certainly with the people who I work with, who report to me, and who are my colleagues and peers, as a way of keeping the relationship as transparent and as clean as possible. So we'll go through our agenda or go through our conversation if we don't have a specific agenda that we're working through. And then in a formal way at the end of a conversation, not every single one, but many of them, we will ask each other what needs to be said that hasn't been said. What needs to be said that hasn't been said. And the reaction you're probably having, which is to take a breath, look up a bit in the ceiling, and ruminate, is the reaction I always have too, which is like, yeah, what does need to be said that hasn't been said? Because it is a subtly powerful question, because it asks you to speak to niggling doubts, small frustrations, half-baked intuition, hypotheses. It's offering you to say, look, it's amazing how quickly the detritus of slightly broken moments in relationships build up. And they kind of pile into the corner, and before you know it, it's messier and more broken than you realized. And what this does is like a constant opportunity to repair, reflect, connect, and actually build that relationship. And I do think in that moment of saying what needs to be said that hasn't been said, it is an empathetic act, because it is actually really hard to know what the other person's feeling and what the other person's thinking. I mean, hell, it's hard to know what you're thinking and feeling half the time. How on earth could you be actually being clear on what other people are thinking and feeling? So rather than you going, well, I think I know what they're thinking and feeling, so this is how I'm being empathetic, one of the more powerful ways of doing that is to ask them. And one of the more powerful questions to get there is what needs to be said that hasn't been said. So I want to see in the chat box what, if anything, is useful or valuable about that. You can see how I'm wanting to engage you in this, because I want to learn from you as we do this myself. And Ian, I'm curious to know what struck a chord for you in just talking about empathy and the power of that one question.
I guess one question. I mean, I was thinking more on a personal basis than in a work situation. But obviously, my mum is in the UK, so every time I get off the call, we have that kind of that was quite a deep question to actually contemplate, because she's in the UK and there is things happening at home and stuff. So I think it can be especially at the moment, quite a confronting question as well.
Yeah, I think it is. I think one of the things that it possibly does is it says, look, I'm kind of unspoken in that is this is a safe space for you to talk about the stuff that you might not willingly talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
And inviting that in. And, how willing people are to share stuff depends on your relationship and depends on trust and depends on all sorts of stuff. But you increase the odds, and that's what we're always trying to do, just nudge the needle.
Exactly.
Let me talk about the second piece. Oh, sorry. What?
Now we have had a few comments. I love that we one coming from Nish. I love that we acknowledge half-baked thoughts when we speak of psychological safety. Is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on, Nish. Oh, and Vanessa going, look, empathy is exhausting. I love that comment from Vanessa. What a talented woman Vanessa is, clearly.
I think that's a different. I think it's a different Vanessa. It's not my wife.
Oh, well, that just obviously people called Vanessa are talented people. I'm seeing that as a theme coming through here.
I don't think it's anywhere. She's not normally that clever. Sorry.
Careful, mate. There is a danger in if you are in a caregiving role that you burn out. And in times like this, which triggers I need to rescue everybody, I need to save everybody, I need to support everybody. It's unsustainable to do that. Your job in this time is in part self-care, looking after yourself. Adam Grant's work around give and take, which is like, you've got to understand what you can give, but also how you stay nourished and how you don't deplete yourself in an attempt to give, because there's no point in you giving in a way that you're now exhausted after a week and now you're no good and those around you are now worried about you. So I'm glad Vanessa said that. Let's talk about mindfulness. The second of the attributes, empathy, mindfulness, and humility. So mindfulness, again, it's a term that we've all heard, particularly in the last 10, 15 years where it's become a thing. How do people here define mindfulness? I'd love to see your thoughts in the chat box. And Ian, to put you on the spot, how do you articulate what mindfulness is?
I would articulate my mindfulness is when I become, you mentioned something earlier on, you said let go. And when you become when you become still, and when that internal voice, to quote the kind of, when that internal voice subsides, that's my mindfulness.
And as a consequence of you becoming still and that internal voice subsiding a little, what then happens?
It keeps everything in that moment rather than thinking about what's gone, what's coming, and I can actually be, in the moment, in the now.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. So being in the moment, I think is classic, and like tapping into self and self-awareness, acknowledging the thoughts and emotions without judgment, focusing on the right now and engaging the senses, focusing on the present rather than the future. So beautiful definitions, classic definitions. Again, my definition, similar to all of that, and with a twist. If empathy for me is being more other aware, mindfulness for me is being more situationally aware. And I get to that definition because when you're mindful, you are in the moment. And when you're in the moment, you can see what's there in the moment with you. And you start separating out what are your thoughts, what are your judgments, what are your interpretations from what's behind them. So there's something really powerful about this sense of mindfulness, of being present and thus being more situationally aware. Now, again, I'm going to ask the same question I did for empathy. Why should we even care about that in a time of stress and a time of anxiety in this topsy-turvy time? Why is that useful? Why would we even care? Like putting on your own oxygen mask before helping others, for sure. I like that. What else? Yes, to pause, to be, and to reflect. I love that from to be ready for the other side. It could sound quite ominous, but we'll go with it. I think part of the power of mindfulness is it allows you to read reality, being more situationally aware. And when you're clearer on what is actually true about the situation, you're more likely to be able to make good decisions about how to act in that moment. We are constantly battling the swirl of data and judgment. One piece of data shows up and our brain, the sense-making organ that it is constantly going, well, let me tell you what this means. Let me tell you what that's about. Let me tell you what this proves. And what happens to us is the data immediately gets translated into judgments and opinions, and we immediately go, and that's reality. We are very typically unconscious of how we take data and we turn it into judgment. And we're going, here's how I'm interpreting the world. This is what this means to me. And I think there's a way that if you can bring regular mindfulness to the moment, it actually is calming to your anxiety. And now's a classic time, because at the moment, if you spend any time consuming media, there's no way you can do anything but get wound up, because we've got this amount of data and we've got this amount of judgment, speculation, opinions, because media companies are like, we've got 24 hours to fill. We've lost sport, so that's 21 and a half hours gone immediately. Now what are we going to do? And we're like, we're going to talk endlessly about this, and we're going to gnaw on the small bits of data we've got until there's nothing left. So part of grounding yourself and being in the moment is coming back to mindfulness. And I'll give you the question that I think is helpful here. And the question that I think is clarifying and reorienting in the moment is, what do I know to be true? What do I know to be true? And what that invites is, it's a little different from the question, what's true here? Although that's fine. But what do I know to be true, for me, invites knowledge of the past, the present, the future. It also invites inquiry about the situation, but it invites inquiry about yourself as part of the situation as well. So what do I know to be true? Well, I know this piece of data, and I know this fact, and I know that I manage my own anxiety by reading books, or I'm at my best when I go for a walk every day. And there's a way that you go, look, I've got a series of data points that will help me react to this moment in a way that is more at choice, rather than just as a reaction to the situation. So I think that's the power of mindfulness. So we've got empathy, which is more other aware, what needs to be said that hasn't been said. And we've got mindfulness, which is more situationally aware. What do I know to be true? Let me ask you this, and again in the chat box, because there's a really rich conversation happening in the chat box. What was useful or valuable about that little piece around mindfulness, if anything? And Ian, what struck a chord for you when I was talking about mindfulness?
Well, the question you asked about what do I know to be true, I think it brings it, what I know to be true at the moment is that what I know to be true at the moment is that I am okay, that I'm fine, that I'm physically fine, that I have that I have food, that there are people who are far worse off than me, that I'm spending time with people generally my wife's next door. I'm spending time with my wife. I'm spending time with, it is time, and it's not time. It's not time that I'm ever going to get back, if that makes sense. So I have to I'm aware that I have to make the most of today.
Yeah. And I'm loving the appreciation that's kind of evolving and emerging from that question for you. An appreciation of what you have as much as what you don't have.
Because I think all we have is today, that is all we have is now.
Yeah, exactly. And some nice comments from people around, we have a choice, and the question feeling like it's grounding and centering, and a gratitude for today. So beautiful. Let me talk about the third attribute. We've got empathy, other aware, mindfulness, situationally aware. And then the third and final one is humility. So again, you know what I'm doing now. So in the chat box, how do you define humility? This is a trickier one, because there's less language around humility as far as I can tell in popular culture. So I'm curious to know how definitions come through here. And Ian, you also know what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you, what do you reckon? How do you define humility?
Getting out the way of ego, getting out the way of me, kind of moving aside, like let moving away from me.
Yeah, beautiful. And that's coming through as well, which is knowing that I'm part of a larger ecosystem. Vulnerability, I like that. Vulnerability and bravery, that's great. Kindness and acceptance, fantastic. Focus on serving others. Let it be not about me, not false modesty from the other Vanessa. So that's great. I love that. And yeah, a sense of being authentically you. So here's my definition, and you can see how these three definitions now fit together for me, which is I think humility is about being more self-aware. So other aware, situationally aware, self-aware. And I do think these three things feed each other. Being more self-aware allows you to be more other-aware. Being more other-aware allows you to be more situationally aware. Being more situationally aware feeds back into being more self-aware, and it probably flows the other ways as well. So these are overlapping skills that build on each other and build a general sense of awareness. And if empathy, if humility is more self-awareness and more authenticity and more kindness and acceptance and vulnerability and bravery, how, if at all, is that useful in a time of anxiety and stress? Because why would you bother being vulnerable or brave or kind in a time of crisis? How's that helpful? Ian, what do you reckon? How could this serve?
I was listening to you and I was watching you there, but I was miles away. I was kind of thinking, I was in my own head. So I'll be honest, I'd be struggling to answer the question because I was thinking of many other things that were around that.
Well, that's good. That's what I'm hoping, which is to provoke thought and provoke kind of insight and reflection.
I think it almost leads in for me to like a gratitude for what we do have.
So I love where you're going with that, because for me, humility is absolutely not false modesty. It's not, I'm no good, you're good, look at me, I'm just this lowly person. It's actually seeing yourself with clear eyes. And actually, for me, that is an invitation to accept your strengths as much as it is to accept your weaknesses. So, and I'll just tell you the kind of the tension that exists in my own head and heart around this, which is, look, I'm good at a bunch of things, and I know I am. I'm a good presenter. I'm a good teacher. I'm a good explainer of complicated things and making them accessible and useful for people. I'm a good writer. There's a bunch of those things that are true. And I also feel like I'm fairly humble in that I'm clear about what I am and what I'm not. I'm clear about how they fit into the big scheme of things. And I'm clear that part of my job is to try and use my strengths as best I can. So the question I think is unexpected but powerful around humility is, what is the best version of me? What is the best version of me? And it is an invitation for you to step into that, the fullness of of who you are now and who you might be with your full potential, of imagining you stepping into the best version of who you are and bringing that to the world and bring that to your community and bring that to your family and bring that to your team and your organization. And it's a little jarring to hear that question, because it almost, you end up on the other side of what you thought humility was, which is like, look how modest I am. I'm like, you know what? This isn't a claim to be brash and be arrogant and be self-serving. It is a claim to say, look, we need people who are grounded and at the same time playing all out at the best version of themselves. And I do think for me, and this is the third question I wanted to offer up, is, who am I at my very best? Who am I at my very best? And that's not an easy question to ask. That's the hardest of the three questions to wrestle with, because what needs to be said that hasn't been said is an in the moment conversation, although it's often speaking to stuff that's been lingering. What do I know to be true is an in the moment conversation as well, which is like, how do I read what's going on and separate the data out from the judgments and the opinions? But who am I at my very best? I think that takes more work. You can still use that as an in the moment question, a question where you're like, I know what I'm like at my very best. I know that I'm like more like this, and therefore in this moment, why aren't I there? How do I step into that at my very best? And um, and that's it. That's what I wanted to say about that. Being to rabbit on. So as a kind of final act, I think in the chat box, what was useful or valuable, if anything, about that little piece around humility and being humble? And Ian, again, back to you, kind of the voice of the group. What struck a chord for you in that?
I think another Vanessa just put on there, how do I get there? I think that's quite key. That's quite a question. And I do think it's quite a confronting one, because it almost, how do I get there? It's almost, it feels kind of, especially at the moment, that feels potentially a long way away.
Yeah.
And also linked with that, with all the uncertainties and all the things you said that you're good at, how will they continue to be qualities that are needed in 6 months' time?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, to pick up on Vanessa's question, which is like, so how do you get there? For me, one of the ways you get there is you tell stories about yourself. You're like, tell me a story of a peak moment for you where you're like, I was in the zone, I was in the flow state. I felt like the best version of myself in that moment. Tell me what happened. Tell me what that was like. It might be recent, it might be in the past, but your stories are often a way to get to the best version of who you are that transcends your skills or your experience or just the stuff you've accumulated over time because you're talented at it. I'm like, no, I want to know what you are like when you're at your very best. And it's through your stories and through self-reflection and through emotional intelligence and through doing the work that you start building up an awareness of what you're like at your very best. And what that gives you is, in times of stress, an ability to reach out and get back to that person you are at your very best. The hardest time to do that is to try and figure it out is actually when you're under stress. Ian, that covers the content I wanted to cover. You can see my sophisticated notes on today's presentation. That's what I was working off. I guess I'd love to ask people, what do they need to say to be complete? I'm happy to answer questions that pop up for people as well, but we're moving towards the end. So what do you need to say to be complete, to wrap things up for you? It could be about what was most useful, what struck a chord, or anything you'd like to say just to say, right, I feel like I'm moving to an end. And Ian, as we do that, what do you want to do to help wrap this up?
What I want to do is, I think the whole experience has been very humbling, obviously, to have you on here and also to have so many people on our very first one. And some of the comments and the honesty that's come through, I think is fantastic. And that's what we want to facilitate. That's what we want to continue. And we want to, to keep this discussion and this discourse going, because I think it's important that we stick together. We really need to stick together and work in this and stay connected. It's going to be very, very important. And I think for all of our six, it's such an important thing. And the three things that you mentioned there to me, I've wrote them all down, and I feel like they've really given me stuff where I'm thinking a lot around it. So it's wonderful. And just to finish on this point, I'll hand it over then to questions, is the actual thing around doing things for someone else and trying to help people. And I feel hopefully what we're doing is helping people. And I just thought I'm actually really, really proud of that. So that's
nice. Good. Yeah, I'll celebrate that. I mean, this is a time where you get to make an active choice to be a beacon of light, because people around you are looking at you to go, how are you behaving? And people respond to the strongest signal in the room. So the invitation for all of us is to go, how am I showing up here? How do I be that person of realistic optimism and non-reactive leadership that can be helpful at a time like this? And I do think when you combine empathy and mindfulness and humility, so you're more other aware, more self-aware, more situationally aware, gives you a better chance to hold that role and be less swept up in the turmoil of the moment.
Fantastic. We have had some more questions, some comments. I don't know if there's any questions, but there's some The people are thanking you, Michael, and being.
Yeah, there's some beautiful, beautiful comments there. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate that.
If anyone wants to connect with Michael, please do. Or if you have any questions, please come to me, and then I can forward them on to you.
Perfect. Oh, so I'm going to make a request. I have a TEDx talk out. It's called "How to Tame Your Advice Monster." It's out 2 weeks out or so, and I'm desperate for it to have more views. So if you get a chance to watch it, get a chance to share it, that would be great. How to Tame Your Advice Monster at TEDx.
Fantastic. Yeah, please do that. And linking with us. Folks, we will wrap this up right now. We are recording this session, so if you want to listen again or tell all your friends, please do. I want to thank you all for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you with us. Thanks for all your fantastic comments. We will be doing more of these. I can't say they're all going to be as good as Michael's. He is some expert and a fantastic presenter. So thanks for jumping in, and it really is an honor to have you on. And thanks for jumping in. It's such a short
My pleasure.
period of time. It's been wonderful.
That's great.
It's been lovely to meet you. And folks, stay safe, stay well, and we will be speaking to you very soon. We've got more stuff coming along, so stay tuned. And yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Cheers. Thank you. Thanks, Michael.